my work visa was also coming to an end. So I needed to apply for reapply for it to be renewed. So I read up on it again, and again I didn't use a lawyer because I knew now how to go about it. So I put in all the paperwork and I threw it in, and this time round I just expected it's just gonna be the same way like happened last time. But shock on me, it got rejected. Wow. Yeah. And I appealed. And in the appeal, there's a way you can accelerate the appeal. You pay an extra $1,000 and your appeal can be, your appeal can be brought to the front of the line. So I paid $1,000 for my application to get ahead of line. And here's the thing, and I still have that response, just to remind me that it was God who made me get that. In the responses, they give you I think it was like it was a 5-page response on why they rejected my application. Wow. And one of them was that I should never have got it in the first place.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to the 360 Perspective podcast with me, Trisha. It is another Thursday, another exciting time where we get to unpack an awesome conversation, which, by the way, if you haven't seen or if you haven't heard on the socials, we are putting together a live podcast experience next Friday, guys. 14th of June, we'll be gathering together for a live podcast experience at ICC Nairobi from 5 p.m. So make sure you are there, because we are going to have this conversation, which we'll begin unpacking today, about redefining success and failure. And to just share part of his story today is a friend that I've gotten to know over the years. We met during COVID, and he had an interesting story in that time, during that period, and he's going to unpack part of it. But he's a colleague, he's a friend, he's so many wonderful things that I will not continue unpacking because he's here to do that. So ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Mr. Martin.
Hey.
Finally
we're here. We're doing this.
I wasn't even sure that we're going to do this today. Get me?
I wasn't sure either.
Yeah.
So in the morning I was waking up and I was asking myself, what is the most convincing excuse I can give you for not showing up?
Oh no. But see, the Lord who fights for us has made sure that you are here today and that we get to do this. And so I think I'll begin by letting you introduce yourself to our audience. Tell us who you are, what you do, or just whatever information you want us to know about you.
All right. Hi. So hi everyone. My name is Martin Mwaura. I am married to one beautiful wife called Rachel. We've done life for the last 18 years, and we are blessed with 3 wonderful kids, 2 girls and a boy, Alyssa, Adessa, and Graham. And I have the privilege right now of just wearing many hats.
Many
That's hats. But which one can I say is exciting me this year is that I'm a builder. Yeah. I realized along the life I like to build, and this year it's a culmination of the years of doing small projects, and now I get to do one big major project. So I'm a project manager, helping oversee a construction project at the church. We are putting up a massive children's facility. And that's really exciting. So that's what I'm doing now, but I'm doing many other things. But for today, that's what I want to be recognized for.
Okay, all right. But that's true, guys. You can go and just maybe Google or check out Martin Mwaura and see what other stuff he's going to do. Yeah. But that's beautiful. Okay, me, I'm used to calling you Pastor Martin because you didn't mention that you also get to do ministry alongside all these other projects that you do. And when I met you during COVID, and I got the privilege of doing a short video where you're talking about your story and the season that you are in. And today's conversation is about redefining success and failure. And I think I'll begin by asking, what initially when you're starting out in life, what image did you have of success, and how did your life pan out in regards to success? Because I think most of us, we get to experience the highs of success, but there are moments when we get to experience the lows of failure. But maybe you can share with us just your journey and how you envision success to be, and how the realities of life panned out for you.
Right. So thank you for that. And so I have looked at success differently as I've grown up. And if you ask me what I looked at success, I think the day it really clicked, or what that meant to me, was the day I graduated from college. I think before then it had never really occurred to me what success really should look like. But for me, I think my realization was when I finished campus. I graduated, I was holding this certificate, and I felt lost, as in completely lost. And I tell people that's the day I realized I was institutionalized.
Wow.
Because up until that point, all I knew was 4 walls of a classroom. From the time I was a little kid all the way till I was in campus. So primary, high school, and then into campus. So there was never a break in between. It was always study, study, study. And my life was defined by books and teachers and assignments. And when campus came to an end, I didn't know what to do with myself, because all I knew was to be a student. And now I had to go out and make life. So, and I was living on campus. So I had to,
yes. I believe somebody out there can relate.
I was living on campus. So I had to, I got kicked out of my room.
Yep.
I had to learn how to, by the way, so just a little backup. So I had the opportunity to go and study in the US. My brother went ahead of me, and my parents thought it would be a good idea for me to go and join him and study. So I went. And so I was living in a dorm campus in the US, in the middle of Midwest America, Iowa, as
out of all states.
I couldn't get as remote as that.
Wow.
And so we graduate, and I leave my campus dorm, and I have to get an apartment. And that was the most scary thing for me, because I'm in a foreign land. I have to live by myself. I have to pay bills. I have to cook, and I have to balance, my paycheck.
Yep.
And for me, that was, you're
even fortunate that you got a job right off from after graduating.
Yeah, I was fortunate, because actually what happened was I needed to get an internship. And it so happened that internship opened up into a job. So when I was graduating, I already had a job. So I didn't have to struggle. I didn't have to, get a roommate to share the rent with. And then I think it was just God working out for me at that time. A friend of mine was traveling during the summer, and they needed somebody to house sit. And I was looking for a place, and they said, "Would you mind house sitting while we are away?" So I got
very divine.
Yeah, so I got to house sit for about 2 to 3 months in somebody's house. So I was living rent free. Everything was there for me. But so it was a soft landing, but I still needed to get a place of my own. And so at that point in time, I started asking, what am I going to do with myself? What am I going to do? I started looking for jobs. Because I was within campus, I didn't need a vehicle, so I used to walk. Then I realized I need a car. Then I looked at my income. That's when I got to know about living below the poverty line. I look at my paycheck.
When they say you're only a paycheck away from being homeless.
Yes, I was. That was me. So everything was unfolding so fast. I didn't have time to process of my future. I lived by the moment, by the day. And so at that point, if you ask me what defines success is, I think for me, it was just like how to balance out life, how to figure out Where do I need to stay? How do I do? Actually, it's because of that I was forced to learn how to cook. Yeah.
We bless the Lord.
Yeah. It was, so anyway, a few years down the line, I leave the state and I go to where my brother is. And
that is to a different state now.
No, I moved to a different state. I leave Iowa, I go to California, you know, and now it's like you move from a small country town to this big, massive, fast-paced. I mean, the cost of living is twice what you are used to having. So I couldn't afford it. So I had to stay with my brother. And then my brother, I went to stay with my aunt after my aunt. So I was moving from house to house, you know. But one time I went to stay with my uncle and he told me, I am giving you 1 month. And after that 1 month, you need to be out of this house. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. And he just told me, you're in my house for 1 month. So that was, and he was like, I'm serious. And like, this is my uncle. It's like 1 month. But out of that, and sure enough, I really went out. I was looking for jobs every day. I would wake up in the morning like I'm going to work, but I'm going to look for jobs. And when the month came to an end, I got a job. I was able to move out and got my own place, and I started
in California.
In California by myself, you know, and started doing life. So if you then ask me when I now moved into my own place, what success looked like, for me was like being able to finally buy my own place, you know, and look. So it was things, I would say. It was defined by things. Yeah, things I own. And you couldn't blame a guy just coming out of campus. You had literally nothing. So success is like you're driving a car, you're living in your own house, you're paying your own way. And I would have defined success then. But farther down the line,
Before you move on, so you moved out and then that's where your wife was already, or rather you guys.
I met my wife in high school.
You guys, I think I need to have both of you here on the podcast.
We met in high school.
Because your love story is one of a
So
kind.
we met in high school. So I went to the US to study. She went to the University of Nairobi to study. And when I was finishing, she finished a year later, and we were, you know, trying to figure out life. And at some point, she wanted to come to the US to do her master's. And so that's how we both ended up in the US at the same time. But I went home one of the just during one of the regular visits to home, and went home, came back.
Like that, Kenya?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you came to Kenya and then went back to the States?
Yes, just visiting, normal visits. And when I got back to the States, I felt like there was this weight in my heart that was so clear. That day, I remember I was going to work. I had just come back from Kenya and I was heading to work. And I got this realization that I don't need to be here anymore. That's in the US. And it was so certain. It's like this weight on me was like, if you stay in the US any longer, you are not doing the right thing. So at that point, I knew at some point I have to go back home to Kenya. But I didn't know when, I didn't know how. I still didn't feel I was ready yet financially. And I had not yet started my master's. So then one thing led to another. I applied for my master's and got accepted, and then I started doing my master's. And it was a 2-year program, but deep in my mind, I knew upon completion, I needed to go back. But God orchestrated for me something amazing, because when I just got my job and I moved out to my place, my student visa was coming to an end. And I told my brother, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I'm going to do what every other Kenyan does. I'm going to go underground. You know, underground meant that you're going to go and start working illegally. But what that meant was that you would have no way of ever going back to Kenya. If you do, it's a done deal.
Yeah.
You can't
Or if you come back to Kenya, you can never go back to the States.
Can never go back to the States.
Yeah.
And my brother says, don't do that. He says, I was working. I was working for a nonprofit. By the way, that's my career all my life. I've worked for the not-for-profit, or what we call the NGO space. So even in the US, that's what I was doing. And so he tells me, go and talk to your employer. And it was a small NGO. And I went to my employer and I told them, look, my student work papers have expired, and I need to move into a work visa
that was
situation.
After your master's?
After my undergraduate.
Or after, okay, before the transition, or before you started your master's program.
Yes.
Okay.
And so he told me, you have to apply for a work visa. And so I go to and I was like, okay, fine. So the following day I go to my employer and I tell her, look, I need to get a work visa. And she's like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Is it like, but no, you have to sponsor me as an organization. And she said, I know nothing about visas and everything. That's news to me. It's like, you go do it. I don't care. We don't have the money for it. We're a very small organization. I can't pay for a lawyer, so you go figure it out. But whatever you need me to sign, I will sign. So I was like, okay. So I remember now going to the Stanford University library and researching on visas. And I got to find these books and I read up on them. This was pre-internet days. I mean, internet was just loading back then. And so I research and I see what it takes to do to apply for a work visa. Now, remember, I couldn't afford a lawyer. You know, I was just starting off. My company has told me, go ahead and do everything, but we are not going to pay for a lawyer. So, and I looked at for a lawyer's fees. I couldn't afford a lawyer. So I had to be a lawyer.
Wow.
So I went and I researched the entire process of what it takes to apply for a work visa.
That's ambition right
there.
there.
So I was like, so I read up on it, I revised, and I found everything that I needed to do. Now, here's the thing. California has, because of Silicon Valley. So what I was going up against was massive.
Wow.
Now, the US government at that time only gives out 35,000 work visas. But applications from California alone, not the whole country, 70,000.
Wow.
And who are applying? The who's who in Silicon Valley. Google, Apple, and all the big tech giants. So here's little me.
In a small NGO.
Trying to put in an application together with Google and Microsoft. I mean, everything was stacked against me. So I don't remember praying. I don't remember fasting. I don't remember doing anything. I just remember I did everything by the book. I didn't skip a step, filled out all the paperwork, filled it out.
Interesting.
God, we
can consult you as a lawyer at this rate.
I became a lawyer. And I took out the forms, printed them out, filled them out. Then where my employer needed to sign, the letters that they needed to write, they wrote, and she signed everywhere.
Wow.
Put in the documentation, send it out. Now work visas and there are only 2 centers that take the work visas in California and New York. So I submitted the one in California, and that's the one that got the largest number of applications. So here's tiny little me competing with the giants for a work visa that they only give out. So for every 2 applications put out, only 1 will be considered. So man, that was, and I just threw it in. But there's also a good part of it is it says, as long as you've put in your application and you are considered within status during the period of your review, meaning that whether it's a yes or no, I'm still in status. So, and they said, and it could take 6 months for the application. I was like, hey, I don't mind. I don't mind waiting 1 year, 2 years. And I remember 6 months later, about 6 months, 4-5 months, getting to 6 months, I see a letter come in, and I used the address of the company. And when I saw it, on top of there, it was written the Immigration Services, and I knew this was my letter. And I was trembling. And I was so panicky, I gave my colleague Says you have to open it and tell me what it says.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't know what I was saying because she's like, I had not told people I was applying for it. Other than my boss, no one else in the office knew I was applying for it.
Yeah.
So she's asking me to read a letter. She doesn't know what it is I'm panicking about. So anyway, she opens it and she reads it and she starts reading and the only word I had is accepted. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I went and I looked at it and my visa application had been accepted.
Wow.
It was approved. As in, I walked on clouds that day. Because what that did for me was that now I could be in status. And it allowed me to stay in the US a little bit longer. And then I remember that's when I was told, you need to go and do your master's. And I went to do my master's. Now, here's the blessing upon blessings when I got that. And maybe at that time you could define it as success because my sister-in-law was an international student and she had signed up for the master's program, the same program that I signed up for. So we were in class together. But she was an international student, and because of my work visa, I was considered a resident.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
I was considered a resident of California.
Wow.
So we were in the same program.
Residency.
So she's paying as an international student. I'm paying as a resident. So we were in the same class. Per quarter, she's paying $2,000.
Wow.
Per quarter, I'm paying $400.
Wow. Don't even remind me. You know me, I have wounds. I was a student in the States, so I know.
Yeah.
I know how much it hurts as an international student when you're paying double, not even double.
I was like almost triple, 3 times.
Yeah, 3 times what the residents pay.
We were buying the same set of books. We were sitting for the same exams.
Yeah.
And she was paying 3 times. And so what I was working, the money I was making was enough for me to pay. I paid my own. I paid my master's comfortably. Yeah, so people used to ask me, how did you do it? And I'm like, I just applied. Wow. And like, you have to show me. So I showed a number of people how to apply for work visas.
Interesting.
And you know what? Not even one got an application. None was approved.
Wow.
None.
Wow. Interesting.
So, I mean, when I look back at it, then it looked like it was a common thing. But now when I look back,
it was not common.
It was uncommon. It was uncommon.
Uncommon favor.
Yeah. And how do I know it was uncommon favor? Because the visa is only valid for 3 years. And then you have to renew it again for another 3. And you can only have it for a maximum of 6 years.
Wow.
So my 3 years lapsed. By then I was done with my master's. And I was like, okay, I'm done with my master's. I still had that feeling in the back of my mind, I need to go back to Kenya. But I was like, let me work for maybe another year or 2, save up some money, and then maybe I can go back home. So by that the time, my work visa was also coming to an end. So I needed to apply for, reapply for it to be renewed. So I read up on it again. And again, I didn't use a lawyer because I knew now how to go about it. So I put in all the paperwork and I threw it in. And this time around, I just expected it's just going to be the same way like happened last time. But shock on me, it got rejected.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I appealed. And in the appeal, there's a way you can accelerate the appeal. You pay an extra $1,000 and your appeal can be, your appeal can be brought to the front of the line. So I paid $1,000 for my application to get ahead of line. And here's the thing, and I still have that response, just to remind me that it was God who made me get that. Ooh. In the responses, they give you I think it was like it was a 5-page response on why they rejected my application. And one of them was that I should never have got it in the first place.
Wow.
Yeah. So I used to read that, because I just had graduated from university. I had no work experience. I was not, what I was applying for was, I was an administrative assistant, for crying out loud. I wasn't, I was not a tech guru. I was not coding to change, Yeah, it was not a skill set that was so unique that the US government would give me a work visa to stay and, change the economy of the US. I mean, I was pushing papers. So, I mean, they said I was like, I didn't qualify to receive this work visa because I was not doing high skill labor work. So already it was like, brother, you got a favor from us. We ain't giving you another one. You gotta go home.
Yeah. You were just lucky. I was like, we don't even know how you got that application.
Yeah. Through. So that thing worked out, and it worked out really well. But it was bittersweet. Sweet is like I knew this was my time to go back. But bitter was that because Rachel was in the US, and I was like, I didn't want to leave her behind. But I knew I needed to go because I didn't want to mess up my status. But the enemy was the devil would threw me some carrots along the way. So I go to my boss and I say, look, my work visa has been declined and I have to resign. And she's like, what? You can't resign? What do we need to do? And so there was panic mode because I'd become so, part of the team and they didn't want to let me go. So anyway, I told them I have to go. And there was nothing else for me to do. Yeah. Then like a week or two later, a colleague comes to me and she asks me, Martin, I hear you're going back to Kenya. And she's like, yeah. And she says, is it because of your work visa? I say, yeah. And she says, so if you were in status, you'd be able to stay on longer. I told her, yeah. And she was an older lady. And she says, you know what? You can come and stay with me. We can get married. And we can get married but no strings attached. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing it purely just to get you your paperwork. I have an extra room. You can stay there and it's all good. And I'm like,
sounds like a good deal.
Sounds like a plan. Sorry, Rachel. But that's what guys were doing, and they were paying for it. Yeah,
you pay for the services.
You are paying to get married to somebody. You get married to an American, and you pay them to get married. And so here's a colleague offering for me for free. She's like, let's get married. And I'm like, consider. And I was like, no, I can't do that. And so I was given so she comes to and tells me.
Did you ever tell Rachel?
Yeah, I did.
Or in hindsight, like later on after you got married, that's when you're like, hey, by the way, there was an opportunity.
An opportunity. And I know a lot of friends back in the US right now are US citizens courtesy of buying their citizenship through marriage. So as comical as it sounds right now.
And it's tough because, not everyone, because since I was there, I had horrific stories. Yeah. Not every story of going that route was always successful. Yeah. There are some that would be even abusive. Yeah. Somebody promises you one thing and then
it becomes manipulative.
Yeah.
So I remember for one friend, the guy started becoming, it became to extortion.
Yeah.
So they had agreed on a certain amount. She would pay him every week. Yeah. And when she pays him, he says, not enough. Add me some more.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't have the money. And he says, okay, I'm going to divorce you.
Yeah, it's a tough life. Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to divorce you. And it's like, and what that means is that, and if you divorce in California, I think it was 3 years. If you divorce within 3 years,
it's not approved.
It's not approved.
Yeah. You can't get that citizenship.
So she had to go and look for more money. Wow. So she would work 2 jobs and just to make sure, because this guy kept asking for more and more and more. And at some point, so anyway, she got it. And I remember her coming to Kenya and she says, wow, it was she paid a big price.
Yeah.
To get. And so since we are talking about success, if coming back home to Kenya, because my visa had been declined, that would have been considered failure to some people. But for me, I knew God had told me you need to come back, but he pushed me. So people asked me, so was it a push or a pull? And I think it was a both, because there was a pull to come back, but it was a push.
Yeah, by far.
At that time,
honestly, some of us also wouldn't be in Kenya if our stories were not one of those where God clearly has said, but you're the one forcing issues, and then now He decides, by this is, if I want you in Kenya, I'm gonna have you in Kenya. And later on in hindsight, that's when you look back and realize it was a more. And as you said, because I more or less went through the same experience, but in that instance, not being able to go back to the States to do my master's almost felt like a failure, in terms of, where do I start from? Like I had no dreams or ambitions of studying in Kenya. Like I had this dream built up, and then just not being able to go back and God just making it so loud and clear, like you lose everything and anything to make it clear that He's actually closed that chapter, whether you like it or not, whether it's comfortable or not, but just abiding by His will, as bittersweet as it is.
Yeah. And so that's the journey of success for me in my life, because if I look at the way I had orchestrated what it was going to look like, I most likely would still be in the US right now.
Yeah. Just
waiting for the right time. Because when I started telling other people, recognize that on your own you can't do it. You need help. And God, if God is in it, He's gonna push you. And He's gonna push you out. He's gonna put you in difficult situations. Because when my visa ended and I came back, up until that point, I left Kenya when I had never worked in Kenya. So all my work experience was US based. All my education was US based in regards to my higher education. All my life skills, driving, understanding life was US based. So I almost felt like a foreigner coming back to my country.
Yeah, and starting life from scratch.
And I had to start. And then up until that point, I had been independent, and I found myself back in my parents' house.
Tell me how humbling that is.
And although I did come with some good money to just tide me over, so yes, I was in my mother's house, but I was, I was paying bills. I was still helping my mother here and there, but I was still living in my parents' house. And at some point, if you don't have the right perspective, it can shake you up to the point that you feel like, I'm actually moving back rather than forward. And that 1 year was the hardest. And I met other Kenyans who had transitioned back to Kenya around the same time. And we became like this small fellowship of our support system. And many of them couldn't handle it and went back. Now, they could go back. I couldn't go back. So God made sure it's like, there is no way back. So I used to like, can I go back? And I'm like, no, I can't. So He closed that door and He burned the bridge.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was not even, back was not even an option. It always had to be forward. And that 1 year was the hardest 1 year of my transition because I had no friends.
I feel like all of us need a support group, because I feel like it's the same story for a lot of people who transition. You've done your education outside Kenya and then you move back. That year that you move back to Kenya, honestly, as you said, for those who have the option of going back, they normally go back. But for those who unfortunately, for one reason or another, don't have that option, man, that year is always the toughest. Toughest. It's tough. Like, honestly, it feels like starting from scratch. You have to get new community here. You have to get, like, if it's a church, if it's, rebonding with your family because you've been away for years. So it's like, woo, where do we even pick from? Pick up from. So
and then also there is a shift in thinking. The way you used to think is completely different from the guys. So even when you try and reconnect with your old buddies, they are cracking jokes and saying things. I'm like, things pass you and you're like, was that funny? It's like, I didn't get the joke. And when you crack a joke, it's like, first and foremost, bro, we can't even understand what you're saying. With your accent.
And making fun of you.
Yeah. And my CV was really hard. It just was not opening doors for me. I thought it was going to open doors for me. And people was like, you just have US experience? Do you have any Kenya experience? And I'm like, no. He's like, I'm sorry, but you don't think we are a good fit for us right now?
Surely. I remember there's one I was actually told you're overqualified to work for this organization.
So what did I do? I went and volunteered for an organization for free. I told them, don't pay me. I will pay myself. I will come to work. I just need you to let me work for you, to just have Kenyan experience on my CV. And I did find such an organization. But interestingly enough, the director of that organization was a part-time professor in the US. So he would spend part of his time in Kenya and part of his time in the US. But he had a non-profit. So I don't know how God just made it, because I don't even remember how I ended up in this organization, because I picked this directory from the NGO bureau. It had a list of all the NGOs.
Yeah, you're ambitious.
And I looked for all the NGOs in Nairobi, and I would go each one and just strike out.
Wow.
And so I ended up with this organization, and he was like, "Where are you from?" I was telling him I'm from the US. He's like, "Yeah." And so we kind of hit it off, because he could get me and I could get him. He's like, yeah. And I told him, man, I'll work for free. And he's like, no, you can't work for me. I'll give you a stipend. I can't give you much. But I was like, it's fine. It's better than even what I was expecting. So I got a small stipend, and so working in that organization kind of opened for me doors. And like clockwork, when 1 year was over, because I came in January and then worked just tarmacked all through. But the following year in January, I got my first real job. And from there, things just looked up. So you could say that was my 1 year of failure, because I was living in my parents' house. I was out of the US. I didn't know what I was doing. No one could hire me. I was not employable. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I didn't know who. I couldn't even figure myself out. And so that was a year of like a wilderness kind of thing. So, but after that, things just started opening up. Yeah.
All right. So tell us about now that next phase of your career. So you moved from this place where you moved back to Kenya, and it's kind of like a rock bottom moment where things are just not working out. You're still trying to understand yourself, figure yourself out. And then now your career starts taking, a peak.
Yeah.
And then something happened during COVID. Do you want to just take us through that story, like through your career, and then pick it up from what happened during COVID?
So when I started, I found myself back in the NGO space in Kenya. And I continued to grow in that space and move from different jobs. So I would stay in a job, work, and then feel like it's time to move, apply for other jobs, and they were not coming as quickly as I wanted them to. But I started growing in my space. And around 2015, I worked for this organization, and I worked there for 5 years. And it ended around COVID time. And it was a defining moment for me in that career, because it's at that point I started getting clarity of what I wanted to become in my career. It was so clear. I now knew. In fact, I had become so good at what I was doing, recruiters now started coming and saying, "Hi, we've seen your LinkedIn profile. It looks really nice. Would you want?" And I would pick and choose jobs. And I would turn down a lot of jobs, because now I was looking for a very particular career path. So in 2019, I knew I needed to diversify what I was going to become in the future. And that meant I needed to be bilingual, meaning I needed to speak more languages. And so I signed up to, for French, because I knew that's where I was going. And the path looked very good. And so I started doing French on the basis that I needed now to diversify my global work experience. I was no longer going to be confined within the region of East Africa. I wanted to cover the whole. I was saying the continent wise. Then something happened. I had shifted, and I was now doing fundraising work. So now I had moved from programming work, from finance, and I had grown to the point where I was doing fundraising. So in one of my fundraising efforts, I made a business decision, and it didn't work out, and it got me in trouble. Well, I didn't think it was trouble, but my organization clearly thought it was trouble. And that just started a chain of events in my workplace that for me, when I now look back, was God now repurposing where I was to go. Remember, I was repurposing myself for a career path. I was charting out my path to success.
What you envisioned.
That's what I envisioned.
In
fact, I'd sat down. I'd even written it down. I knew the path. We talked about it with my wife, and I said, "This is the trajectory I was going." And I was saying, within 5 years, this is where I want to be.
Country director.
I was in level at that level, senior management level, at international level, not just local, international. And it was very clear. And around that time, when I'd so clear, God then comes with his path. And so that business decision was the beginning of my downfall, if I would put it that way. Then, because with that, a disciplinary action was taken. I had to explain my actions as to the business decision that I made, and so that now I did it with the best of intentions. Even when I asked people to look at my case, they're like, "There is no case here," and somebody started asking me, "Who is looking for you? Who's against you?" And I couldn't understand why there was such vengeance, if I can put it that way, as to this decision. And somewhere along the line, people used to tell me, "You need to resign. You need to resign." But I used to be like, "No, I have integrity. What I did was I did it above board. I have nothing to hide, and I'm gonna go through the process in a way to prove I'm innocent. Because if you are running, it means you are guilty, and I'm not guilty." And so I went through the process, and I get the worst news ever in March of 2019. So I get marching orders. I was told, "We've reviewed your case and we've determined that we have to terminate you from the job." I was like, wow. And so I get that like on I remember it was a Friday, and there was Friday night worship. And I remember being so upset at those guys. I mean, my immediate boss was there, and I remember yelling, banging the table. But they told me, "You can appeal the decision." And I was like, "I'm not going to even appeal this decision. It's rubbish. And you guys are what. And I said all manner of things. And then there was Friday night worship. And I remember going to Friday night worship, and I was raising my hands and like, "God, see," I was upset. I was in tears. I was like, "God, I mean, why would this happen to me?" And then a week later, I had 10 days to appeal. And on the 9th day, and so I went to my friends, I went to, Rachel, and I told them, and everyone kept telling me, "You need to appeal." Because I was like, "I'm not going to appeal." And they kept telling me, "You need to appeal." So anyway, after a few days, my emotions kind of cooled off. And so I wrote a letter saying, "I'm going to appeal." The day I submitted the letter to appeal, the next day, COVID checked into Kenya and lockdown began. So I was in limbo. So at that point, COVID has checked in.
So that was around March 2020.
Yeah.
When all this was happening.
Yes. Actually, it was March 2019. Didn't COVID start in 2019?
No,
or 2020?
2020,
Oh,
yes.
so 2020. Yeah,
March
2020.
2020.
So it was March 2020. So then COVID started. So when COVID started and everybody went under and people asking what are they going to do jobs, I didn't even know if I was going to have a job. So I was stuck. So in the appeal process, as you wait, you're still a staff. So you're not fired, but you're not a staff. So I was still drawing a salary. So I was at home. So where everybody was working from home, I was relaxing.
But getting a salary.
But still getting a salary. So it took them another 4 months before they could come back to me because it was chaos. So everybody was like, we need to figure out COVID and figure out how to do these things. So in the meantime, I was just at home. I couldn't work because I was technically not staff. I just put an appeal. And so 4 months stayed, and then my appeal was activated again, and I had an appeal, and I was still fired. And that was a really difficult time for me because here I had defined my path to success. And I was on it, and I was achieving it, and I was getting to it. And then now here comes, I'm jobless in COVID.
Hey.
So
This
COVID time, I was jobless.
Wait, couldn't even get any better.
That was like, so people were trying to figure out jobs. So when people were being laid off, I was part of them who were laid off. So I knew what it was like. But something also amazing happened. The termination ended very interesting in the sense that even though they terminated, I was paid all my dues. If it was gross misconduct, the policy says that you're only due for whatever your salary was. So you walk away with nothing. I mean, other than your salary, you walk away with nothing. So for me, I had leave days, I had all accumulated stuff, and they paid me out all those dues.
Wow.
So my dues and all the money I had put in the circle, I was able to get. And that money is what I used to, so I got a nice big lump sum amount of money. But that's what I used to pay off our house. So we had a mortgage. So in COVID, although I was jobless, it's when we got to the next level of our finances because we cleared all our debts.
It's interesting because I remember when we were having this conversation a while back before recording, we were talking about, can success and failure happen together? Can they coexist?
Yeah.
You know, can you have on one end, you're successful in one thing, and on another end, there's what ideally looks or seems like failure.
Right.
And
that was me. That was me. Because here I was jobless with COVID. No one knew, is it another 2 months? Is it another 2 years? But we just, and so most people would say, hold on to the cash. Because you don't know how long this drought period is gonna be. So hold on to the cash. But we made a decision that time with my wife is like, we're gonna just settle everything. And I went to the bank. I asked them, what's the balance on my loan? And they gave it to me, and she was like, because at that time everybody was struggling financially. So she thought I was coming to negotiate to say, can my payment go lower? Can you defer? I was like, I want to clear it. And she's like, excuse me? She's like, yeah, I want to clear it. She's like, are you sure? It's like, yes. And I think that was one of her most interesting afternoon sessions she had with clients, because I think prior to that she was negotiating with people who were saying, I'm laid off, I don't know how I'm going to pay. But here is one guy who walks in and says, I'm coming to settle all my accounts.
Wow. That must have been a faith move.
Yeah.
Especially when you're jobless.
Yeah.
You have these lumps of money. The tendency is, can I hold on to this money because I don't know how long it's going to take to get another job. I have a family, I have kids, there's all these responsibilities on your back.
Yeah. And so we said, we're going to clear everything. So in 2020, when people were financially strapped and people were wondering where they're going to pay rent, food, my wife and I were dancing. That, And we went through the process of, releasing the title from the bank and everything. So by the time that whole COVID season had ended, I mean, we were just in, it was a place where we couldn't imagine ourselves being. So I was debt-free in COVID, as in not a single debt. The only thing we needed to pay was utilities. And the monies left over was still enough to pay off utilities and food. And because life was simple and we didn't have school fees to pay at that time because the kids now are all home. So it was, as much as it was a really painful career point for me, because even as I was applying for jobs, there are sections that when you apply for jobs, you say your last job, and then at the bottom there it says reason for leaving.
Oof, toughest.
Oh man, that was a hard one to write. And I remember doing one interview one time. It was an online one, and it was a really senior position. And we were talking and everything was going well. And I had said this, I'm not going to say I got fired from a job, but if I'm asked, I will say. So, and 2-3 job interviews that had gone on really well. No one had asked me. But in this one I was doing, the country director who was part of the interviewing panel was we were talking and I was giving information, and says, oh, wait a minute, are you working right now? He says, no, I'm not working right now. And says, why were you working? And I said, the organization. And then he says, why didn't you, what happened in the last workplace? And I told them, and I just saw his face shifted. And I knew this job, I'm not going to get it. And sure enough, I never got it.
Wow.
So that thing, I started feeling like this is going to be a monkey on my back for a while. And so it took me, from that time, I think another year and a half before I could get back to the workplace.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that year and a half, because you mentioned about how even the roles changed at home.
Yeah.
Before that, were both of you like in terms of financial, like working and bringing in money? Both of you were working and bringing in money, or was there a point when you were bringing in money, your wife was at home, and then now things shifted?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
So my wife has a whole journey of success
and
failures in her.
Yes.
Because one day, so there was a time we decided that she stays home, not because she doesn't need to work. It's just because we were in transition with the children, and we just said, okay, you just stay home. And so there was a point in time I was the one bringing in the income. But by the time I was coming to my end, she was already working. But there was a time where I was the only one working and she was at home. So now the shift happened. I stopped working and she started being the one now to be the provider for us. And it worked well because with the mortgage now out of the way, and that was the single largest debt item we had at home, and the most expensive. With that out of the way and with no school fees, it was then bearable for her to manage. So we managed. Yeah.
So let's talk about now during that season. I remember you talking about it gave you an opportunity to raise your son.
Yeah.
I remember during COVID, we had that interview.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
So my son was around, he was just starting school, and he had not yet gotten the grasp of reading and writing. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm the father. And back in the day, I think this is what the father was supposed to do, right? And my son had just started school, and so he had not fully got the whole thing of reading and writing. So we had the books for reading. And so I started, so in the morning we had this routine where instead of just watching TV or everything, we would sit down and spend the first half of the morning just going through reading vowels and reading. And by the time we were done with that COVID season, my son was reading and writing.
Wow. So you actually spent that COVID season tutoring your son and bonding more with him.
Yeah. And so for me, it was really, and because I used to have friends who I would call up from time to time and they're saying, I am working hours on end. I would wake up at 7 and then go to bed at midnight and all I'm doing, and my kids, I'm just busy. And I'm like, I spend my afternoon with my son. We played ball. We bought balls. We would kick ball outside. We would play sports. I mean, for me, COVID was such a refreshing time for me because it's just God who just used that time to reorient me back with my family, because I can get carried away with work. I'm those kind of people. So God just took that as a pause moment for me to just recalibrate with myself, with my family. But it was also a time of reflection for myself. So when we were starting, just before we came online, we were talking about, in failure, people tend to run away and hide.
They retreat.
So for me, COVID was a forced retreat. There was nowhere else to go. You couldn't reach out to people. But that helped me to just reflect upon myself. What is my success? Because clearly it wasn't working for me.
So it was a moment you had to redefine success.
Yes.
Because you had this path where you thought you were headed and you had everything planned out and you had this vision.
Yeah.
And then things go a different direction at work.
Yeah.
And then now this becomes a hindrance to you achieving what you thought
Right.
was your ultimate success.
Now, here's the thing. I still wanted to follow that path. I when I sat back and I reflected and I said, other than this curveball that had come in, I still wanted that path. But around that time, my bishop comes to me and calls me out one day and says, let's meet. And so when things started opening up, we meet for coffee and he says, you should consider pastoral work. And I'm like, no, thank you.
A
no.
whole country manager.
As in like, no. It's like God, he says, because he came and told me, when I see you, I feel that God, that you could really do pastoral. It's like God has not spoken to me. Please. And that began this internal conflict within myself of like what I should do. And so when I got back to work, I started pursuing that path again of ultimately international. And I was doing an international job. Because
so that's in 2021, 2022.
That's 2021.
You said about a year and a half
yes.
outside work.
2021 getting into May, June, thereabouts. So about a year and a half. So I put that voice and I'm like, no. And I get back to it. 3 months into that job, I just feel it's not working. It's like, and there's nothing wrong with this job. And the job was well. So I remember getting to December and I was so ready to go on break. So we go on break. Come January, I remember telling God, you need to do two things about me in this job. Either you give me joy to do this work or you fire me.
Wow. That's a bold prayer right there.
And I'm like, be careful what you pray for. So come January, I'm back and my boss reaches out. My boss, at that time, we were working remotely. The entire, the core management team was in the UK. The implementation team was in Kenya. So my boss was sitting in the UK. So she rings me up and says, we need to connect and just start planning for the year. I was like, sure. And when she does the meeting invite, I see she adds the CEO. I was like, okay. So the CEO is going to be on this meeting. And I just thought it was a normal strategy meeting that we were going to lay out the plans for the year. So we connect online and we do the niceties and everything. And then my boss hands it over to my CEO. And then the CEO says, we've been looking at this role that you're doing and we've come to the conclusion that it's not what we had envisioned. And so we are going to cancel this position. Because it was a new position. And my contract was ending that March. So it's January but the contract is ending in March. So they said, look, we just want to let you know we are not going to renew this contract. But we are not going to keep you. We need you to, we're going to end this job at the end of January. So this was around mid-Jan, 10th, 12th, thereabouts. So they say, end of Jan, hand over all your stuff, your laptop and all the other gadgets that we've given you. We are ending this job in January. We are not even going to wait till March.
Wow.
I was like, God, man, you're really firing me.
Wow.
But they said, but
we will pay you.
We will pay you.
Till March. Ideally,
Till
that's
March.
what's supposed to happen.
Yeah. But my contract said it has a 1 month notice. So they could have just given me 1 month notice.
It's their fault. I mean, you gotta pay for emotional trauma, mental, like all those things.
So they tell me, we are not keeping you. We are letting you go, but we'll pay you until March with all your benefits.
Wow.
My health benefits are not going to be cut. All my dues are not going to be cut. They are going to roll all the way till the end of March, but you're not going to be working. And they said, you can use that time to look for jobs.
Not bad.
I was like, okay, Lord, I can work with this. I'm at home and I'm getting paid to do nothing.
Once again.
Yeah, so once again, I'm at home.
Once again. You're fired, but you're earning.
I'm earning. And I told my wife, and she's like, man, what kind of employers? I need, man, what kind of job? I need jobs like this. I don't know. So January, I clock in for work. By the end of that day, I don't have a job. 2 weeks later, I'm not working. So I go back into the job market. Now I'm applying for jobs. I'm applying for jobs. So all January, nothing. February, nothing. March, so interviews start coming in. So there's this really one good job that is like, oh Lord, you've got to make this one work. You've got to make this one work.
Your ultimate.
It's the ultimate. It's like success. It's the one that will. If I get it, I will even call people and tell them, "See me,
Kiongozi.
See me, hey, see me,
hey Chief Kiongozi."
Hey, I just wanted to let you know I have a new job. Yeah, it's this and this. As in, it was gonna be bragging rights, like proper. And so, and I go through like, I think 3 or 4 stages of interviews. So psychometric, with the HR, with the hiring manager, and I go through all of them. And at so then the one I did with the hiring manager was going to be my boss. And we meet with her and we connect. But she says, you need one more interview with the CEO. And once you meet with the CEO, if the CEO likes you,
well and good,
you're in. And I'm like, bring it on. So I wait, and I wait, and I wait, and I call them, and they tell me wait, and I wait, and all the way till the end of March. And then remember, I'm seeing my salary is coming to an end, and I'm like, oh Lord, I pray, I would love that this job ends and this job begins, and there would never be a gap in my salary, because when my salary ends in March, my new job starts in April. And I'm like, Lord, do it. And, we are praying and I'm believing and we are, oh, man. Man, that thing flops. And flops like in, these guys stop even calling me. They've never even written back to me even today. I'm like, what did I do wrong?
You're still waiting.
I'm still waiting. And it goes quiet, like, shh, silence. And I'm like, okay, Lord, so what is it that you want? So let's talk. You have my attention.
Pull a chair.
Yes. Let's talk. I mean, you tell me. And then I'm told, remember ministry? I'm like, oh, no.
I'm that conversation with your bishop.
I was like, no, that's not what I meant. And sure enough, that conversation comes up. So I'm a deacon at that time in church, and there's this strategy all in that is in gear, and bishop is really struggling. He's like, I need somebody to come in and run this process, and I don't have anyone to do it. And my colleagues there look at me and say, yeah, give it to Martin, he'll do it. And I'm like, what conspiracy are you guys working on right now? And that was the only door available for me at that time. All these other doors were closed. And so God told me, choose that door. And I'm like, church? That's not my path.
From a country manager.
Yeah, that's not my path. I'm like, that was a struggle. That was hard. That was tough. And I fought that. But I was like, okay, Lord, so you closing all the doors, if this is the one, fine. And I said yes. And I went to Bishop and I sat down and he says, okay, go. I told him, fine, I'll do it. And says, go pray about it, go craft your CV. I mean, go craft your JD. I'm like, you want me to craft the work you want me to do?
Yeah.
So I had to go sit down and process what the work was going to do. And I do all that. And I sign a contract. Before I sign a contract, and I remember the day I said yes, I remember I said yes on a Tuesday. From Tuesday to Friday, 5 different recruiters reached out to me for jobs. As in, I get a call on a Monday. It's like, hi, is this Martin? How are you? We've seen your LinkedIn profile. Are you available? Would really like to have a chat with you. I'm like, where were you? Where were you?
Yeah, 3 days ago.
Where were you 3 days ago? And I declined. I said, no, I'm not available. Wednesday, another recruiter calls me. Hi, how are you? Are you available? I'm like, where are you? And that happens Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Every day a recruiter calls me from a different organization asking me, would I be interested in a job? But up to now, I've figured now God was telling me, this is your path. This is your path. And it was almost like it was a test. It's like, whose path are you going to take? I know I've told you to take this path, but whose are you going to take? And I stuck with that path. So I'm still been on that path. It's been 2 years now.
Wow. And
I can tell you it has redefined my thought life on what success is. And it's not what I planned.
Wow, Pastor Martin, what a story.
Yeah.
What a story. And even as we learn this conversation, I think just speaking from what you've shared of how your life panned out and what seemed ideal for you, the ideal path that you had carved out for what success ideally was going to mean for you versus the redirection and the diversions that God brought your way to lead you to where you are right now in ministry. What insights have you gathered along your journey, particularly in those low moments of failure, but also in those moments of redirection towards redefining what success is? What are some of the insights that you've gathered?
Yeah, so I think for me, this is what I've seen success is. And success has to be outside of you. Because if you define success for yourself and it's not aligned with what God has called you to do, you may eventually get there, and it becomes the proverbial story of, climbing up the ladder only to find yourself on the wrong wall. And so success for me has to be, it's a mix of God ordaining it and you walking in it. And it's a mixture of things. So what I will define success will not what you will define for success. But there's one key thing that will always, the common strand I would say is this, is that what did God say you would do? And so I may be sitting here as a multi-millionaire and I'm saying success was because I was able to make all these millions. and you could choose the path I took, and you end up as a multi-millionaire and be depressed totally because you took my path. So success has to be your path, and you have to, from time to time, you have to have an awareness that you are called for something greater than yourself. There are things you will not be able to see in our future. You will not live to see. So say, for example, so we are here talking about success. Maybe your success was to raise up somebody, take care of a young child, raise them up, and make them see them go to college. That was your success. But nurturing through that person becomes the person who will change the life of millions. So at times, some people's life is just merely to raise a child. So one of the things we struggled with, we had this talk with my wife was that, am I enough as a stay-home mom? Am I doing it well? Is it compared to my peers, am I doing it well? And so many stay-home moms can say, am I successful because I'm staying home, raising the children? But maybe that child will be the child who will raise up to become this great person or influence that changes the globe. So success for me, I've come to define it as what God has called you to be, and you have walked in obedience, even though it doesn't make sense at the point of you living it out. Eventually, people will say, had it not been my mom, had it not been for this person, had it not been for this, I would not be where I am today. And so I owe everything to them. And it's at that moment you say, I'm actually successful. But guess what? You never got to live to see it.
Yeah, I love that. And what insights have you gathered from your moments of what seemed like failure in your life?
What did I learn? Failure happens. I think we all have to fail. It keeps us humble. 1. 2, reflect on that failure. What could you learn from it? Maybe it was a pride moment. Maybe it was God redirecting your steps, like me being fired from that job. I mean, I had to learn how to forgive, so that I don't carry the bitterness and the anger. So there has to be a process for you to learn what that failure was for you. So that's reflection. 3rd, don't run away from people. And failure is also a good thing because it filters who your friends are. When you're in success, you've got a lot of people on your corner. But when you fail, a lot of people fall by the wayside. And so your friends become very small. And those small friends, don't chase them. Cling on to them because they are for you. If they are for you when you are down, then those are the best people for you, because they will, when you're up, they will tell you truth to your face and help you stay humble and focused. So don't run away from life. Don't run away from people. And I see a lot of young guys do that, and I tell them, that's the last thing you should be doing.
Yeah, please emphasis on that, because that one for running away from
don't
people.
Run away. Don't run away from people. Don't, especially the ones who are for you. Yeah. I mean, run away from the fake ones. That one is okay. That's good. In fact, they do it for you. They run. You call them up, they're not picking your calls. They are busy. And it's like, okay, I get you. Yeah. And so for me in that period, so it keeps you humble. It gives you a time to reflect, but it also helps you to know who is for you. And once you know who your friends are, keep them close. And then finally, it's a season. It will end. It's not permanent. That season I was in ended. It's history. I'm telling you, it's behind me. I'm having something completely new ahead of me. So it's also remember that failure is not permanent. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Pastor Martin. What a way to learn this conversation. I truly appreciate. And I think I had a final question about looking back, concerning success and failure, what would you tell your younger self in regards to success and failure?
Yeah, I think I would tell my younger self is allow detours. As in, I get so fixated on a line. It must be this. I have to do it this way. And when we are young, we have the energy to push through things, and we force them. And that's good and bad. But allow detours in your life. A detour could be you meet a friend, you could meet your spouse, you could meet your breakthrough, and it could also take you to your greater purpose. So my detour, my failure led me to ministry. I would never have picked ministry, ever, ever on my own. So I'm here because of a detour.
Yeah. Wow. And I think what a way to land this conversation, Pastor Martin.
Thank you.
And yeah, I think what a reminder that sometimes failure isn't necessarily a wrong thing or end of the world, but it just could mean it's redirection to the path that God wants for you. As Pastor Martin says, sometimes God takes you to places that you never ever imagined that you would have been there. But I think the level of fulfillment, the level of joy, the level of satisfaction, the peace, the amount of work that you are able to do in God's kingdom, the lives that you're able to touch and influence is way beyond what you would have done if you went the direction that you thought was fit for you. But what a conversation we've had today in regards to just this topic that we'll be having at our live podcast experience on the 14th of June. It will be happening at ICC Nairobi from 5 p.m. and we'll be unpacking this conversation more in depth. We'll have a panel of amazing human beings that you've seen here before. We'll also have a keynote speaker just help us unpack just redefining success and failure. And would you let us know in the comment section how have you gotten to redefine success and failure in your very own life, even as we continue having this conversation and looking forward to our live podcast experience. But that's it for today. I really do hope that you've been encouraged, inspired, uplifted by this conversation. Remember to share with a friend. Remember to subscribe to this channel if you haven't. But until next time, it is a goodbye.